Amazon owns logistics. They own the ocean, the air, warehouse fulfillment network, and they've spent hundreds of billions of dollars to build the best-in-class final mile delivery system. And in spite of the very large investments that Shopify has, until they get that, until they become a true marketplace, I don't really see them as a competitor. Welcome to the Day 2 podcast. Today's episode, Prosper Show. We look forward to this event every year. Shannon and I just went and visited the Prosper Show. And then right before the Prosper Show, I went to another conference called the Roth Conference, which has been going on for 35 years. It's where investors and private equity groups and venture capitalists talk to companies. And today's episode, we're going to unpack a little bit about what those conferences were. We're back after a couple of weeks and happy to be recording the Day 2 podcast again. So thanks for joining us. I'm Jason Boyce, host of the Day 2 podcast, founder and CEO of Avenue 7 Media. With me today is Shannon Roddy, my partner in crime. Shannon, how have you been?
I've been good. I feel like it's been a whirlwind, Jason, with all the traveling. You were at Roth, and then we had an amazing team meeting in Vegas just prior to Prosper. And I took the weekend off to fly down to LA, meet with some clients, see some friends, flew back up for Prosper Show, flew back home, and then immediately drove to Tennessee with my family. So my head doesn't know what time zone I'm supposed to be in.
You know, we had these amazing meetings. We flew into Vegas. We had these amazing leadership meetings for Avenue 7. One of the best meetings I've ever had. I just couldn't be happier and prouder of our leadership team over here. And that was really meaningful, but also tiring. And then on that Sunday, I flew from Vegas to Dana Point, where Roth Conference, I was invited by my good friend, Rohit Kulkarni, and they do this event every year in Dana Point. And it's pretty amazing. And I have to be totally honest, Shannon. Rohit invited me to be on this panel, Amazon versus eCommerce, or Amazon and eCommerce was the title. And I show up at the first event party and I say, Rohit, can I ask you a dumb question? Who comes to this? Like, I was just so happy to be on a panel with Rohit. And he goes, oh, great question. Not a dumb question at all. He goes, you've got companies here, small cap, big cap companies. They're trying to pitch, either raise money or talk to their investors and get them updated where they are. And there's a lot of folks with big pocketbooks that are there looking for where to invest their money. And so it was really fascinating. It's the first event that I've been to, although Rohit and I have done webinars multiple times. He's great. He's funny, incredibly knowledgeable. I was invited on this panel with Eric from founder of Hawk Media, and Daniel Tejada, one of the founders of Straight Up Growth, both Amazon agencies. But Eric's is a much broader agency. They do a lot of digital media, Facebook advertising, Google advertising, etc. There were a lot of topics, mostly Amazon, and Rohit kind of started it off like, look, the investor news has been terrible. They're not making a lot of money. Their growth rate has slowed compared to the growth that they're seeing previously and most importantly during COVID. And pretty much unanimously, Eric, Daniel, and I all said, we're not seeing it. We're just not seeing a decline in revenue from our client base. And in fact, they're investing more in the Amazon channel and not less. And so that was Rohit's first question. Earlier in that morning, I listened to the chief economist for Roth Ventures, who basically said in a nutshell, the recession is coming. It is inevitable if it hasn't already started. Looking at historical data, the inverted yield curve and all these fancy economic terms point to one thing: the recession is coming. So get ready. I was a standing room only at this actual presentation of the chief economist, Shannon. And I was standing next to a couple of guys, and one of the guys looks at me and goes, wow, that's uplifting. It was just a real downer talking about the economy. And I was like, no, I just don't see it. I'm not seeing it in the consumer spending yet, at least on Amazon. Now, maybe people are seeing it elsewhere. And so that's really how Rohit led the panel. It was fun. It was interesting. I loved hearing Eric and Daniel's perspectives, even when I disagreed. And probably the favorite thing I enjoyed saying the most is when Ravi asked the question, this whole Shopify versus Amazon thing, is this a real fight? Is there a winner? And I used an example, Shannon, where I said, look, I was a former Marine, and you talk to generals, all the combat arms generals would say, we win wars because we pull the trigger.
Well,
But the smartest generals would always say, logistics are what wins wars. If you don't have bullets to pull the trigger on, you're not going to win the war. And it's true. And if you translate that to the e-commerce space, Amazon owns logistics. They own the ocean, the air, the final mile, the warehouse fulfillment network. And they've spent hundreds of billions of dollars to build the best-in-class final mile delivery system. And in spite of the very large investments that Shopify has, until they get that, until they become a true marketplace, I don't really see them as a competitor.
I don't either. It's one of the questions that I've always struggled with because, again, people sort of pit them against each other and they have completely different uses. I mean, it's like a D2C website where you own the customer, where you can use multiple fulfillment options, and you have so many abilities to integrate things with your Shopify website. You can, integrate retargeting, you can integrate pixeling, you can set up affiliate programs. There's so many things that you can do that we sort of look at like your website is what you own and Amazon is real estate that you rent. I think it's always an and Amazon. We've had clients who have come in and asked that question, is it my website or Amazon? And we're like, yes. The answer is both. You have to do both.
Yeah.
They're both critical. They're both essential. And I mean, I really just want to reference back to the episode that you did with Tyler Jeffcoat of Seller Accountant. Know what your dollar return is on each of your platforms and invest wisely. You never want to get so out of proportion that you are wholly dependent on any one platform, be it, Amazon or Walmart or anything else. You want to have diversification, something Eric Koymans spoke about at Prosper Show, online diversification. But I've never understood that argument. I think people who pit them against each other, it's sort of like comparing, bananas to pine trees. I don't see the correlation. So,
but just to throw a curveball, both of our opinion on this topic, I managed to bring up Buy with Prime. And for those of you who don't know, Buy with Prime is the new program from Amazon where you could source from your FBA inventory, deliver to your .com customer, and apply the Prime badge on your own .com. And there was a lot of discussion about that. This is one where I actually disagreed with Eric and Daniel on the panel, who both felt that this is going to be a fly-by-night, nothing's really going to happen with it. My take on Buy with Prime is this is a Trojan horse. And Amazon already has 55% of the online market share. Shopify has a big chunk of that. But Amazon, in order to continue to feed that e-commerce giant, they're going to go after the rest of the market. And in order to do that, I think they've got to have potentially a Shopify competitor, and they're very smart. They came in from their strength. It's the Prime badge and their logistics, and they're trying to sort of merge on all of these .coms that are out there, or Shopify or whatever. And in order to ultimately, in my opinion, ultimately they're going to create a Shopify competitor, I think. But one more thing, Shannon. And then I ran into Joe Kazakanis at the Prosper Show, our good friend from Marketplace Pulse, and he and I were talking about it, and he felt that it's going to be gone in a year. And so I was like, damn it, I disagree with Eric and Daniel on stage. And then I talked to Joe. I respect all these gentlemen, but I was like, maybe I'm wrong, but I feel strongly that this thing is going to survive, and it's going to open doors for Amazon to do more stuff in the e-commerce space as a direct competitor with Shopify.
Here's my comments and thought on Buy with Prime, and again, sort of Amazon versus Shopify. Amazon tends to be really good at one thing, which is marketplace. Now, yes, they're good at AWS, and yes, they're good at advertising, but I think you're right from a Trojan horse standpoint. I had a conversation with somebody at Prosper Show, and there's been rumors that Shopify is coming around and saying, you can't integrate with Buy with Prime because it violates their terms of service. And my initial opinion was, that's an argument and a policy that Shopify is going to lose in the court of public opinion. Because if you have Shopify customers who are saying, I want to use Buy with Prime, and I'll jump to WordPress, I'll use WooCommerce, I'll use, Wix or any of the other platform to get Buy with Prime, Shopify is going to cave. That's my prediction. That's my guess. And the reason why I agree with you on Buy with Prime is one figure, 20% increase in conversion rate. That is insane. If I said, Jason,
that's right,
you've got an e-commerce website, you're doing $100,000 a month, a year, whatever. If by pushing a button, you could increase your conversion rate and your sales by 20%, you would say, where do I push? Where do I start? That's why I think it's going to stick. People tend to be pretty poor predictors of what's going to happen or work out based on the past. They try to look at the past as indicators of the future. But what really sticks is simplicity and culture and technology, where you have alignment between new technology that makes things simpler and align with current cultural values. You've got a winning product, service, etc. And I think Buy with Prime does that. And yes, people are like, well, I want to get a little away from Amazon, not relying so heavily on Amazon, but I can integrate them with my website now. Now they're doing my fulfillment and logistics, and Amazon's getting all my customer data, still reliant on Amazon. But if you can leverage it, I think it's a win.
Just sort of wrapping up with the Roth Conference, it was, again, I always appreciate conversations with Rohit, and I got him to commit to our show, Shannon. So early announcement, Rohit's going to come on to the Day 2 podcast with us probably a week after Amazon announces its quarterly earnings every quarter in order to help us unpack what he's seeing from his finance mind. And, we'll have some back and forth together. So Rohit, he's great. He's very entertaining. He's incredibly bright and smart and snapped into the e-commerce game. So I'm looking forward to that moving forward the Day 2 podcast. And so shifting gears to Prosper Show for a second. First of all, I want to start with your impression and of the show floor. Now, this is the floor where companies set up booths and try to attract customers, clients, etc. I wasn't sure what to expect this year. I remember last year it being the aggregator show. CNBC was there. Katie Schooloff was there interviewing and talking about all the aggregators, and it was a big aggregator show, huge booths, and there were still a lot of good aggregator activity. I saw Unibrands there, of course. Just like last year, I saw Elevated Brands. I think Thrasio had some sort of presence. I didn't see Perch. Did you see Perch?
I did not see Perch. And I think Thrasio was a sponsor. I remember seeing them on a lot of the registration stuff.
Yeah. But what I did see, Shannon, I'm curious to see what you saw, a lot of software aggregators, the Carbon 6s of the world, who are out there acquiring a piece of tech that does a thing and then trying to Frankenstein it together into their overall dashboard or software tool. So overall, I was pleased to see a lot of activity on the floor. They had some presentations that were going on, more commercialized right there on the floor. There was a lot of booth activity. A lot of people had a lot of good things to say about the interactions they were having. But, really nice surprise. Just very apparent that there was no longer the aggregator show.
Yeah, I mean, my first reaction was, there were some pricing changes to the Prosper model this year. And to be honest, I was expecting a little bit of a decrease in attendance, and I did not see that at all. If anything, it seemed like there was more people there, and that was really encouraging. It felt like, again, they've established themselves as sort of the premier Amazon conference. Christine Corcoran, I think, and her team did an amazing job putting it together. It felt like everything flowed really well. As a speaker, I felt like everything was just mapped out, really, really conveniently. I had tons of great interactions walking the floor, including meeting with the Carbon 6 guys. They've got some great tools. One thing I did notice, because I walked the hall with Justin Wilhite of Consumer Quest, and, you just see sort of all of these brands or companies that sort of pop up with names that have Amify or AMZ sort of in the name somewhere, and Quantify and all the rest. But it's sort of like the space is open, and, he'd say, well, have you heard of this company or this company? I'm like, never heard of them, brand new. But the space, it's like the game for Amazon is so open that anybody who does 3PL, logistics, product packaging, data, advertising, you name it, there's a software or service out there for it. So made a lot of great connections. I felt like the networking was really, really great this year. They always do after parties and the after parties, which I usually am fast asleep for.
I'm usually back
like 2 o'clock in the morning Eastern. Great. But overall, I thought it was a great show. I really enjoyed it. I feel like the presence was there, the energy was there. And just amazing people, amazing attendees. It's such a great conference to go to.
Yeah, and for me, back in the day when I was a seller, I used to love walking the floor and seeing what kind of tools, what kind of service providers could be there to help me grow my business. And obviously, I love the presentations as well. And speaking of which, I've had the honor of being on the advisory board for going on 3 years now. And just after your presentation, which was terrific, Shannon, I walked into the advisory council meeting, and Matt Snyder, who's also from Very Desk, I think the name is shortened to Very now, came up to me immediately when I walked into the advisory panel meeting and said, man, my guys were sitting in on Shannon's presentation on Amazon SEO and said it was awesome. And I was like, well, obviously it was awesome, Matt. So, maybe,
thanks for that, Matt. Appreciate it.
The other thing that's very interesting, and, kudos to the leadership at Emerald and at Prosper Show for making a conscious effort to make the presenters and the show more appealing to a diverse crowd. And, I was sitting in the back at your presentation, Shannon, about SEO. And you know what shocked me? This is the geekiest of all geek category topics, right? SEO, right? It's a science. And half of the folks that were sitting in the crowd were young women. And I was like, all right, this is great. No, back in the day, you'd see a bunch of, white dudes walking in there who hadn't showered in a few weeks. But, it was really nice to see that, from my perspective, it was a much more diverse crowd than what I am used to in the last many years.
Yeah, I think there was a very intentional part, diversity in speakers and diversity in leadership, ultimately flows out to diversity in attendees. And I didn't notice it. It was just the second time I've been at Prosper, but I love the atmosphere. I love the vibe, and the people were great. I think previously there was sort of an emphasis on, we always need to cover the new and exciting topics.
Yeah.
And one of the reasons why I think my topic got approved was I said, we've got to get back to executing the fundamentals with a very high level of excellence, because, just like software, Jason, I didn't see any new software. There was no truly innovative software that did something that another software didn't also do. What they're competing on is how well that software does it, right? How effectively it does it. And, you talk to sellers and they're excited about all these sort of like, what's the latest hack? What's the latest, tweak that I can make to like increase my conversion rate, this, that, and the other. And then you look at their listings and their advertising and you go, you're not even executing the fundamentals.
Or they're out of stock.
Or you're out of stock. Yeah. So there's just a lot of elements of, I think the focus for the content was great. I was disappointed, Jason, that I didn't get to go to more of the other speakers' presentations. I had meetings that overlapped. Eric Quaymans and Lee McHugh of eCommerce course, we all spoke at the same time. We would have loved to go to each other's presentations, but one of the things I really appreciated this year was they recorded every session. And I don't recall if they did that last year, but
not everyone should. No, but I've got 6 that I want to look at and watch myself.
Yeah, I'm very excited. Those are going to be releasing, within the next week, and I can't wait to go back and watch all of these other ones. I know that Ritu Java from PPC Ninja, she just got tons of praise for. I think she did two or three.
She did a workshop. I don't think that will be available unless you paid for the workshop, but their presentation at the Prosper Show proper, then absolutely. And you can't miss Ritu's comments. She's always working on cool and exciting stuff. But also, to your point, Shannon, the fundamentals, right? It's really important. So, a couple of other things some feedback that we as an advisory group collected, it was interesting. There were several people who came up and said, we love Prosper Show. We love coming here every year to Prosper Show. We come, we meet with colleagues, we meet with people who are fun and interesting, and we get to see them every year, but then it's like nothing, crickets. And so I believe, hopefully Christine will kill me for saying this live on our podcast, but I believe that Prosper is going to make an effort to stay connected with that audience throughout the year. We're doing some stuff to help direct them to resource the ability to do that, because it's the premier trade show that's out there. And why not continue that community conversation with each other throughout the entire year? Because by God, the topics today are going to be very different from 6 months from now. So why not do that? So I'm really excited to see what that management rolls out. I'm really happy to see more diversity showing up. I think it's good for consumers. It's good for Amazon. It's good for sellers. And look, I tip my hat off to Amazon too. I think they've done a great job reaching out to the African-American community, offering these great resources to Black-owned businesses, which is very cool. And I just hope to see more of that in the coming years.
Jason, I think one of the things that I came away with, not only meeting with our team in person, but just Prosper in general, is we have a need as human beings to interact in person. And, yes, we live in sort of a remote virtual Zoom world. Our company is fully remote, but we make it a priority to meet in person because it makes a difference. There are things that are communicated, that are discussed, that we get and need as human beings when we're in person that you just simply don't get. And yes, I love all the sort of virtual summits and, we're going to do all this via webinars and Zooms, but I think it's so important, those in-person conferences, because we're human first. And I think that actually the ability to truly communicate with people. And there's just an element where, as much as I enjoy, listening to some of the sessions or meeting people, it was the ability to go out to dinner afterwards or hang out with them and have sort of those additional conversations that you cannot have in a virtual environment. And I think it's important. I think we can't forget the importance of in-person conferences, meetings, presentations, etc. It's just different. So you hosted a panel, which I thought was really good. I've attended some of the panels in the past, haven't been super impressed or didn't feel like I learned much, but I really enjoyed this one on trends and predictions. You had, again, a very diverse, panelist group, and I thought the questions were good and sort of well-directed, and there wasn't consensus and agreement on every single topic or issue, which I also appreciated. You get different perspectives. What I think I most appreciated about it was the transparency that the different seller sort of brand owner representatives had, was telling their personal story or experience of, this year, this is what we did. This is the challenge that we encountered. This is how we faced it. This is what we're doing in the future to prepare and to plan. Some are from Ollie, Steve Simonson. There was just a handful that they give very specific information. And I love that because it makes it more tangible and applicable, as opposed to like, let's just all spin our theories, right? Nobody really cares about theories. How did you survive 2022? How do you plan to survive and grow in 2023? And I felt it was really hands-on. What was your sort of favorite takeaway from hosting that panel? What did you get out of it?
Well, personally, it's my favorite panel that I do. The day before, I was on a panel of other Amazon agency owners talking with Rohit, and then the very next day, I was leading a panel. And and you're right, what an amazing panel it was. Steve Simonson of Empowery, he just sort of nonchalantly in one of the pre-calls leading up to the show said, "Oh, by the way, Jason, I sold all 7 of my brands this year." I was like, "Wait, what?" This is a huge 9-figure brand seller, right? Who has been in this e-commerce game and the Amazon game longer than anybody. And he just sort of like, "Yeah, no big deal. I just sold all of them to 3 different groups." I was like, "Congratulations." So on stage, I mentioned that to the crowd, and I pointed over Steve. I said, "Guys, this is what success looks like in your business right here, when you can sell 7 brands and then chill." Summer Jubilee, I always screw up Summer's last name. Jubileer. There we go. I finally got it right, Summer. Summer promised to come on. She's on a podcast of her own with my friend Scott Oshman, but she promised to come on and talk about Ollie products, vitamins, 1P vendor, but very snapped into the Amazon community. She would like to go 3P, but they won't let her. And then Janelle Jackson of Marketing Brands. She manages something like hundreds of licensees with, little brands like Martha Stewart brand and, America's Favorite Test Kitchen, stuff like, huge TV brands. And so it was great to have all of them talking. And the way that I like to structure the trends and predictions, this is the 3rd year in a row that I had the honor of doing it. I say, let's look at the year that was, what surprised you? And almost everyone said it was 2 years. It was 2 years in one. The first half of the year, the volume was coming as if it was never going to stop. And the biggest problem was they couldn't get enough inventory. And almost immediately following that, and supply chain costs were through the roof. And, there was this ridiculous container costs, everything. And almost immediately, mid-year, it switched to, I have too much inventory and my supply chain costs are really going down, but I don't know what to do. And I have to start discounting and getting rid of products. So it was a really painful year. And we all had, we kind of had the laughing moment instead of crying moment as we looked back at how difficult and crazy and sort of schizophrenic last year was. But that was the big thing for the most part. And then Summer had this really painful story about how Amazon, because their product is meltable. In the summer, some of their product melts and their FBA becomes responsible, or the warehouse becomes responsible for keeping it cool. They just told her, "You got 30 days, get it out of here." And it ended up costing her like $1 million in losses, which was really brutal and not okay. And she did say that she was able to negotiate this year with her vendor manager if that doesn't happen. And then Janelle, again, it was just a tale of 2 years all built up into one. And then, mercifully, after the panel, the bar was open. So that was an opportunity to say, hey guys, let's go drink our worries away from last year. But let's look forward, right? Let's look forward and see what's coming down the road. That's where I had just come from listening to the lead economist from Roth Ventures tell a whole room full of investors and companies that trouble's coming. If it's not here already, the recession is coming. And so there was a lot of talk about, okay, well, what are you doing as a business to plan? Are you looking to promote more? Are you buying less? Are you spending more or less on advertising? And I loved what everyone said, but this is why I love Steve Simonson, who's been a guest on our show, and he'll be back for sure. But Steve said, no, I'm not recommending that the new owners pull back on advertising. And we said this before on the show. Recessions are a time to pounce because everyone else is running scared, pulling back on advertising, and it's a lot easier to gain market share. Now, you may not grow a ton in revenue, but you can eat up other people's market share. So that was his key takeaway. And I really emphasized it on the panel and said, listen to this man. We just sold 7 brands to 3 different buyers in the last year. He knows what he's talking about. And, I think everyone is sort of collectively holding their breath, hoping, praying that the next 12 months won't be nearly as crazy as the previous, but also sort of a knowing smile, understanding that it probably will be nuts too.
Jason, there's almost sort of an unstated assumption that our percent of market share is sort of fixed or tied. And that if the market share decreases, that our percentage of that market share is going to decrease as well. I mean, right? That's sort of the assumption of, hey, there's a recession, but it's not like everybody's going to stop spending money entirely. There's still things we want. There's still things we need. Looking at a market that's $34 million a year on Amazon that has declined by 22%, and some of the top performers in that category dropped by 68%, but these new up-and-comers, some of them were growing by 50%, 80%, some by like 1,000%, right? So the idea that if you see a recession overall, if there's overall decreased spending, specifically on Amazon, right? Just talking about Amazon, if there's decreased spending, it's not to say that your revenue is going to go down that same percentage that the category is, because it is completely defied by the brands or competitors that are coming in, and as we like to say, playing the Amazon game right.
That's right.
And some of these top market, the top selling market leaders, they're not playing the Amazon game. They're pulling back a little bit, or they're just doing what they've always done, expecting that they're always going to win because they're the market leader. And that's where you see a category drop by 22%, but the market leader dropped by 68%, because they're not being aggressive in a time where the overall category is shrinking. But there's more market for them to take, because it's clear that, they didn't have to lose that. They didn't have to lose that. And I think that's something that we love helping companies do, and say, look, even if your category declines, our goal is to find ways to help you grow. If there's market share to be taken, if there's other companies or brands that are pulling back and you've got a unique value proposition, here's how we can position your brand or product to continue to grow you. Or even if the market as a whole decreases by, say, 20%, but our clients can stay steady even, that's an increase. It's really an increase in overall market share percentage.
Yeah, 100%. And I've always felt this way. I've been 21 years in the e-commerce game. There's always an opportunity to pounce. There's always an opportunity to gain share, grow business, especially in a recession. I survived the Great Recession in 2008 with a very big business. We didn't do it by being conservative. Now, did we cut costs that were excessive? And I think Steve said it best on the panel. He said, you do the things to improve efficiencies in your business, cut costs that aren't driving success anyway. You should be doing those things anyway. Just put a little extra emphasis on it. And if you do that and you see the opportunities open up, be ready to pounce, essentially. And I couldn't agree more. I thought it was great advice for the crowd. It was a great opportunity. I kind of ended with 4 questions. I like to do a lightning round. I said yes or no. Amazon will finally be restrained by legislators or federal agencies in 23. I think all 3 of them said no. I was the only one that said yes. I also throw in a vote. Ironically, on that note, as a quick update, the California Attorney General's lawsuit, Amazon had put through a dismissal request to dismiss the case with the California judge, and they denied it. And so it looks like that California Attorney General's case will go forward. And I think the next part would be like the California AG is asking for a temporary restraining order on the buy box suppression tactic. Things are going to happen. It's either going to happen in the courts or in legislation at some point in 2023. I think Rohit asked a similar question on the Roth Conference. I was the only one that said, oh yeah, it's going to happen this year. So again, going against the grain here, I'm the only one that said yes. We'll see if I have egg on my face towards the end of the year, Shannon. The next one I asked, well, Amazon fees will go down. It really got a laugh. Everyone was laughing. I said, yeah. And then I think everyone on the panel said, no way Amazon fees go down. And again, contrarian, I came in, I said, I think it's going to come down. It may not be a lot, but I actually think at some point mid-year, Andy Jass is finally going to do something to relieve some pressure off of sellers. And I think I said that more in a hopeful way than really believing that it's going to be true. I hope that they do that because I think it would be good for them, Amazon as well as sellers. Walmart's online marketplace will gain market share on Amazon in 23. I think everyone said yes to that. There may be one dissenter. And then the last one, Amazon will continue to sue more fake review brokers. Everyone said yes. I said, will it be enough? And everyone said no. So, it was a fun panel. I love reflecting on the previous year and then looking ahead to give the audience members an opportunity to think about what may or may not be coming, how they could plan now instead of waiting until it's too late.
The two things that stick out most are, and again, Tyler Jeffcoat said this best, in a recession, brands and companies do what they should have been doing already, to a large extent, which is cut wasted, anything from logistics to spend to salaries. I mean, I think that the aggregator sort of showed what that looks like when you sort of believe that there's endless funds. Yeah. There's not. And, Southwest Airlines, Herb Kelleher said, look, we only care about profitability. If anybody talks to me about market share, I'll punch them in the nose. But you have to care about profitability at some point, even if you
have to offer. You always have to, especially if you're bootstrapping a business. But don't get too greedy on profits. You got to focus on that growth, right?
But at the same time, there's always a balance. But at the same time, in terms of the legislation aspect of it, I think, again, people are looking backwards and say, look, Amazon and other, big tech companies haven't been regulated in 20 plus years. And the entire landscape has changed, and we just don't see it happening. But I think there's an underlying seismic shift that's happening in terms of legislators being a little more savvy and getting a little more dialed into even speaking the language. I mean, we've seen that, with some of the Congress interviewing Mark Zuckerberg and Facebook, and clearly they didn't even understand the question that they were asking. And I think that's changing. And at the same time, we ran into Peter Kearns in the hallway at Prosper Show, who we both know and has been around for a long time in the Amazon space. And he asked a question, and I think it was valid and very, very authentic. He said, is it changing? Are things getting better? And I think, the question is, there's a potential to get better. And I think, we've heard from a lot of people at Amazon. I've had a lot of conversations where, Amazon is trying to make a shift to really be more seller-centric, listen to seller feedback, but it really comes down to the next several months, and really I think we'll know by the end of the year, where the rubber meets the road. Will Amazon actually make changes that truly benefit sellers and show that Amazon is a partner? And you talked about that in one of the previous episodes. Amazon's always said, we don't even want you to refer to us as partner, but at Accelerate, they said, we're your partner. And so I think it'll be interesting to see how much of that is goodwill and intent actually plays out, is actually manifested, and isn't sort of, I don't feel like it's a PR stunt, but I just don't know how much is going to actually change internally at a culture that's been built over the last 20 years of prioritizing customers at the expense of sellers.
Yeah, who, by the way, are the biggest profit dollar generating customer. But, the fact that Amazon hired Peter Kearns and good people like Peter Kearns who are asking the question tells me the change will happen. Is it going to happen at the pace you and I want? No. But I do, and I think we told Peter, I think we've seen some improvements. We're looking at 2% improvement, 3% improvement, which is better than going the opposite direction. And, I'm hopeful. Sometimes, Shannon, you got to fake it to make it. I think Amazon's faking it a little bit with this partnership talk and trying to, to bring sellers under their wing. I think the Amazon Accelerate Conference was a good one. I think it's time for us to do another episode that we did after the Amazon Accelerate conference late last year and say, okay, how much of these things that they said they were going to do are we actually seeing in the wild? I think some of them have already become casualties of Andy Jassy's rent pen. So I think it would be a fun exercise, Shannon, for you and I to go through that list again and do another episode on, okay, Amazon, you came out in October and you said X, Y, and Z are going to happen, but only happening things for a while, but what the hell happened to X and Z? You know? So we'll see. I think that would be fun. Anything else to add, Shannon, about Prosper?
I'm looking forward to the next one, honestly, and to watching the recordings of the sessions that I missed. But it was so great seeing the team in person. It was great meeting, some of the Prosper staff in person, and so many of the amazing partners, the sellers, the brands, and the other agencies. It really is a business built on relationship. And, even a lot of the other agencies, we don't see ourselves as sort of cutthroat competition. We all have our sort of space and niche. And there's certainly enough sellers and brands out there that need good help that, we love being able to meet up with those people when we can. So
yeah, we for our listeners, we highly recommend going to the Prosper Show. And as always, if we can get a coupon discount like we did this year, we'll send it out to our mailing list. So be sure to sign up at theday2podcast.com for our mailing letter. And the Roth Conference, I really enjoyed it. It was my first time going. I'm already looking forward to Amazon Accelerate in the fall. I did, Shannon, bump into Bohan, former CEO of Helium 10, who's now more of the advisory and strategic role, say that he wasn't sure if the Selling Skills Summit was going to happen this year or early 2024. So I would be sad if they don't have that show. I really enjoyed it last year. I was hoping that they could build on it, but it looks like maybe they're going to delay that. So we'll see. Fingers crossed that it happens, but if not, we'll be there and see them in 2024. If you're ready to start growing and protecting your brand on Amazon with a team of experienced Amazon operators, you can visit us at day2podcast.com. That's day2podcast.com. And lastly, if you know anyone else who would gain value from this podcast, please share it with them. Thanks for listening and happy selling.